Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, let me read a few quotes from the last 6 months about securing our southern border from some of my Republican Senate colleagues. Quote, "This crisis requires swift, serious, and substantive action." Unquote. Quote, "It makes no sense for us to do nothing when we might be able to make things better." Unquote. And quote, "This moment will pass. Do not let it pass." Unquote. Yes, indeed. These are words, Mr. President, of our Republican Senate colleagues, uttered at press conferences and floor speeches and interviews from just the last few months. There are many, many, many more quotes like these going back years from Republican senators, Republican Congress members, from the Speaker, from Republican speakers, from the former Republican president. We kept hearing the same thing again and again and again. "We need to do something about the border now," they shouted. "The border's an emergency," they screamed. "We cannot put this off until tomorrow," and on and on and on. So, 3 months ago, here on the floor, Republicans got a chance to back up their angry words with real action by voting on the strongest bipartisan border bill Congress has seen in decades. And practically every Republican voted no, including my Republican colleague who said it makes sense to do nothing. Then he voted no. Including my Republican colleague who said this crisis requires swift action. He voted no. And the Republican Speaker, Johnson, who said at the time, he said, quote, "The time to act," unquote, on the border is yesterday. And then told the whole world that our bipartisan border bill would die in the House if we sent it over to them. Donald Trump has spent years bellyaching and bemoaning the problems at the border. But when Congress finally reached a breakthrough on a strong and bipartisan border bill, he told his MAGA acolytes to kill it so he could exploit the chaos at the border for political gain. He was bold and open about that. He wanted to exploit the chaos at the border for his own political gain. That's cynical even for Republicans, even maybe for Donald Trump, whose cynicism knows no bounds. For Democrats, the situation at the border is utterly unacceptable. That's why we worked with our Republican colleagues for months to write the strongest border security bill Congress has seen in a generation, a bill that had the support of the Border Patrol Union and the Chamber of Commerce and the extremely conservative Wall Street Journal editorial board. But Donald Trump, desperate to exploit the border for the campaign trail, torpedoed this bill right in its tracks. He knew it would take real action to secure our border. That's why he didn't want it to happen. Republicans will go on and on about the border this year, but their rhetoric, their political ads, everything else will ring hollow because the border bill they killed in Congress will linger over them like stink on garbage. Now on AI. Mr. President, I just returned from the Special Competitive Studies Project first ever expo on artificial intelligence, where I spoke about the Senate's ongoing efforts to tackle AI. As I've said before, tackling AI must be an all-hands-on-deck approach. AI is so complex, so rapidly evolving, so broad in its impact, that it will take all of us working together to maximize its potential and minimize its harms. That's why I was pleased to see President Biden will announce a $3.3 billion investment from Microsoft later today for a new AI center in Wisconsin. This investment from Microsoft will create thousands of new good-paying jobs and help America keep a competitive edge on AI. AI will remain a top priority for this U.S. Senate. We just finished our bipartisan AI Insight Forums, where we learned so much about AI's promises and challenges. Very soon, our bipartisan AI working group will release our policy roadmap, highlighting the findings and the areas of consensus from our forums, which will help our committees fine-tune their work on AI legislation. We look forward to moving forward on AI. Now on FAA. Last night, I filed cloture on the underlying bill and the Cantwell substitute amendment, with the next procedural vote scheduled for tomorrow. All of us need to work constructively and with urgency to finish the job on FAA. Nobody, absolutely nobody, should want us to slip past the deadline. That would needlessly increase risks for so many travelers and so many federal workers. To get FAA done, we need three things: cooperation, haste, and a common desire to get to yes. Any single member who insists on extraneous change will only increase the likelihood that we miss the deadline. God forbid something shouldn't happen when we do. I hope that we will finish this job very soon, so we can send a bill to the House in time for them to act. I thank Chair Cantwell, the ranking member of the committee, Cruz, and all my colleagues who have worked assiduously to get FAA done. Now on abortion. Just when we thought Republicans' anti-choice rhetoric couldn't get any more extreme, Republicans keep stooping to new lows. In an interview yesterday, Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee for president, was asked about claims that he would, quote, would support certain states with bans monitoring a woman's pregnancy. Donald Trump's response: that would be up to the states. That would be up to the states? Let me say that again so the American people hear how extreme this is. Donald Trump was asked yesterday if he would support states who want to monitor women's pregnancies. Instead of condemning this grotesque invasion of women's privacy, Donald Trump thinks that if states decide to do so, that's apparently okay, A-okay with him. It's revolting. In just the last few months, we've seen states like Florida enact some of the most extreme and cruel abortion bans in decades. So if Donald Trump and hard-right Republicans get back into power, should there be any surprise if some states pass laws allowing for women's pregnancies to be monitored? I ask my Senate colleagues, do you agree, Senate colleagues, Republican Senate colleagues, do you agree with Donald Trump's extreme, intrusive, crazy view that states should be able to monitor pregnant women if they want? Do my Senate Republican colleagues, who say they're the party of individual freedom, believe states should have the power to track movements of millions of women if they so choose? Make no mistake, Senate Republicans created the mess we're in right now, where the presumptive Republican nominee is seemingly open to states monitoring pregnant women. Senate Republicans owe the American people an answer on where they stand on this absurd invasion of American privacy. And finally, Mr. President, on the CHIPS and Science bill. Yesterday, the New York Times reported a remarkable statistic from a recent study on the semiconductor industry. Thanks to funding provided by the CHIPS and Science Act, the United States will triple its domestic chips manufacturing by 2032, the largest increase in the world. The report goes on. Had Congress not passed CHIPS and Science, America's share of global chip production would have kept slipping, but instead it's expected to triple in less than a decade. Mr. President, this report is great news for American jobs and America's economy, and is precisely what we envisioned in the Senate as we worked on the bipartisan CHIPS and Science bill. With help from the federal government, communities in New York and Arizona and Ohio and Texas and Montana will become the next hubs of tech innovation. We're seeing growth happen right now in front of our eyes. Micron is expanding, Samsung is expanding, Intel is expanding, BAE Systems is expanding, and more. All of these companies are expanding in the United States, thanks to the CHIPS Act. When I began working on the Endless Frontier Act years ago, this was the hope: a new wave of tech jobs, a new wave of scientific research, and revival of federal investment in these areas. This report on the impact of CHIPS and science shows America is on the right track, and our confidence in passing this legislation is vindicated. I yield the floor.